Hello and welcome to the Deep Dive. This morning, a pretty strong earthquake, magnitude 6.9, struck off the Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia's far east. Now, obviously, any big quake gets attention, but this one also seems to be, well, intersecting with quite a bit of online buzz.
Yeah.
Some viral predictions even, about global events, specifically for 2025. So today, we're diving deep into what actually happened with this specific quake. We'll unpack the science behind tsunamis, how they form, how warnings work, and then importantly, try to put it all in context with those broader public discussions and predictions. Our mission really is to give you a shortcut, help you get well-informed, cut through the noise, maybe find some surprising facts along the way. Okay, so let's unpack this morning's event first. A magnitude 6.9 earthquake. That sounds pretty serious. It hit about 100 kilometers east of Petropavlovsk-Kamchatka. The depth was 43 kilometers. Now, like I said, you hear 6.9 near the coast, and the first thought for many people is probably tsunami. But here's the really interesting part, and maybe the core of today's discussion. No tsunami warning was issued. None.
Right, and that's actually fascinating because it really highlights a key scientific point. A 6.9 is definitely powerful, no question, but its depth and the way the fault moved, that determined everything. 43 kilometers deep, like this one was, is often just too deep to cause that big vertical shift on the seafloor. And that shift, that sudden up or down movement, is absolutely essential to generate a tsunami.
Ah, okay. So it's not just about the raw power or being near water.
Not at all. Think of it like this. A tsunami isn't just a giant wave, it's the whole column of ocean water being pushed or pulled. If the seabed doesn't move vertically in a significant way, that energy just doesn't transfer effectively into the water to create those really long wavelength tsunami waves. It might cause local disturbances, sure, but not a basin-wide tsunami.
Okay, that makes sense. So if it wasn't this specific quake, why is Kamchatka generally seen as such a hot spot for seismic activity? Why does it have this reputation?
Well, the geology there is pretty dramatic. Kamchatka sits right on top of what we call a subduction zone. That's basically where one of Earth's giant tectonic plates, the Pacific plate in this case, is actively diving underneath other plates, the Eurasian and Okhotsk plates.
So it's a constant grinding process.
Exactly. Constant grinding, immense pressure building up. It makes the region incredibly active seismically, a real hotspot for both earthquakes and volcanoes, too. And Kamchatka isn't isolated. It's a really important piece of the much larger Pacific Ring of Fire, you know, that huge horseshoe-shaped zone around the Pacific Ocean. It accounts for something like 90% of all the world's earthquakes. It's like a giant natural laboratory.
Wow, 90%.
Yeah, it's huge. And Kamchatka specifically has a history of truly massive quakes. We're not just talking 6.9s. Back in 1952, for instance, there was a monster magnitude 9.0 earthquake there. Now, that one did trigger a major Pacific-wide tsunami, caused a lot of damage, even as far away as Hawaii. So while today's quake didn't pose a tsunami threat, the region itself definitely has that potential locked away in its geology.
Right. And given that history and, the general public awareness or maybe anxiety about tsunamis, it brings us back to the basics. How do they actually form? And maybe more importantly today, how have we gotten so good at figuring out when one isn't coming, like this morning?
Absolutely. The key, as we touched on, is that sudden, large-scale vertical displacement of the seafloor. This usually comes from shallow, large earthquakes, typically on those subduction zone faults we just talked about. When one plate suddenly slips and lurches upward or downward relative to the other, it's like a giant paddle pushing or pulling that massive column of water above it. That generates the initial wave energy that travels across the ocean as a tsunami.
Okay, shallow and vertical movement. Got it.
Yeah.
And thankfully, our ability to detect that specific kind of movement and warn people has improved massively.
Oh, immensely. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, the PTWC, is really the nerve center for this in the Pacific. They use some seriously advanced tech. We're talking about things like the DART buoys, deep ocean assessment and reporting of tsunami. These are sensors moored way out in the deep ocean.
Right, I've heard of those.
Yeah, they constantly measure pressure changes in the water column. They work together with coastal tide gauges and a whole network of real-time seismic sensors. This whole system lets them detect a quake almost instantly, run computer models to see if a tsunami was generated and how it might travel, and then issue warnings, sometimes within just minutes, often well before any waves could even reach the nearest coastlines. It's really quite remarkable.
It really is. The speed is incredible, detecting it, processing, alerting.
Yeah.
While the potential wave is still out there in the middle of the ocean. And you mentioned earlier, this wasn't always the case. There have been tragic failures in the past.
Sadly, yes. There was an instance in Hawaii in 1975 where, due to human error, No warning was issued for a local tsunami, and 2 people lost their lives. Events like that spurred major improvements. Places like NOAA's Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory, PMLL, were instrumental. They really pushed integrating computer modeling and refining the technology to predict tsunami behavior much more accurately.
And it's not just about the technology itself, right? There's a community aspect too.
Absolutely. The tech is only one part. There's a big push now on community preparedness. You might have heard of the Tsunami Ready program. It's been adopted internationally. The goal is ambitious: make basically all communities at risk tsunami ready by 2030. That means education, evacuation plans, local drills, making sure people know what to do when a warning is issued.
Which brings us back kind of full circle to the other element surrounding today's quake. Not just the geology, but the online chatter, the 2025 prophecies.
Right.
So what is the connection, if any? You have a real M6.9 quake happening, no tsunami. And then you have this widespread online talk about 2025 tsunamis. How do these collide?
It's a really interesting intersection, and it shows how narratives, even fictional ones, can shape how people perceive real events. Take someone like Baba Vanga, for instance. Her prophecies are famously, let's say, symbolic, very open to interpretation. They often seem to reflect general anxieties or cultural themes rather than specific, datable predictions. So it's easy for people to connect dots after the fact or read current events into them.
It's sort of like a Rorschach test for global anxiety.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Then you have something more specific, like the Japanese manga, The Future I Saw, by Tatsuki Fujimoto. Now, this manga does explicitly feature a fictional disaster scenario set in July 2025. But, and this is the crucial part, it's fiction. It's a narrative device used by the author. Fujimoto is an artist, a storyteller. She's not claiming to be a prophet.
But people might not always make that distinction.
Exactly. Especially in uncertain times, stories like that can really resonate deeply. And in 2025, this manga definitely got a lot of attention. Some reports even mentioned a minor case of mass hysteria. Apparently, there was a noticeable drop in summer tourism to Japan from parts of East and Southeast Asia, where belief in premonitions might be more culturally ingrained. There were even reports of airlines canceling flights from Hong Kong to Japan back in June, supposedly due to these fears.
Wow. So even though today's quake didn't trigger anything, and the manga is fiction, the idea of a 2025 event was already out there, making people anxious. Did the author herself ever weigh in on this?
She did. Tatsuki actually made a public statement saying she's not a prophet. She explained her intention was more about encouraging mindfulness, being prepared, kind of like carrying an umbrella just in case it rains, not predicting a specific storm. Interestingly, her statement was prompted by a real event, a swarm of earthquakes near Japan's Takara Islands in July 2025, which understandably made people nervous given the manga's theme.
So fiction and reality feeding into each other.
Precisely. And what's really telling is how this public unease, whether from fiction or real minor quakes, actually led to tangible actions. Reports indicated families in coastal areas of Japan, places like Kagoshima, Osaka, Okinawa, started stockpiling emergency supplies and practicing evacuation drills on their own initiative. Without waiting for official warnings, it just shows the power of narrative, fictional or not, to influence how people prepare and behave in the real world.
Okay, that really highlights the need for clarity, which leads to a fundamental question. What can science actually predict about these events, and what are the hard limits? Because today's quake feels like a perfect case study. Science accurately assessed the lack of threat, despite the magnitude.
That's exactly right. And scientists involved in earthquake and tsunami research are very clear about this. They absolutely cannot predict the exact time, location, or magnitude of a future earthquake or tsunami. The Earth's systems are just too complex, too chaotic for that kind of precise forecasting. That's the limitation.
Okay, so no crystal ball.
No crystal ball. But what science can do is incredibly valuable. They can assess probabilities based on historical data and geological monitoring. They can track stress building up in fault zones, like those subduction zones. And most critically, they can issue real-time warnings the moment a significant event actually happens. Modern systems, increasingly using AI and machine learning, are getting faster and more sophisticated at modeling the potential impact, like tsunami wave heights, almost instantaneously. So the shift is really from trying to predict when to being able to react extremely rapidly and accurately if and when it occurs. That's the power we have now.
That makes sense. It's about rapid response based on real-time data, not prediction. So let's bring all this together. We have the science, the historical context, the online discussions. What does this mean for you listening right now? If you live near a coast, or even if you just want to be informed and not swept up in hype, what are the practical takeaways?
Okay, number one, and this is paramount, trust official sources, always. Get your information from the recognized scientific agencies, PTWC, USGS, your local geological survey like the JMA in Japan. They provide evidence-based, real-time information, not speculation.
Good advice. What else?
Second, local preparedness is key. If you live in a coastal area, know your evacuation reps.
Yeah.
Seriously, know them. Don't just assume you know where to go. Have a plan for yourself, for your family. What do you grab? Where do you meet? Practice it.
So personal responsibility is huge.
Absolutely. Third, cultivate what you might call informed alertness. Pay attention to official warnings, definitely. But learn to distinguish between that verifiable scientific information and, the symbolic stuff, the speculation, the fiction. This helps you stay ready without unnecessary panic.
Right. Discerning signal from noise.
Exactly. And finally, understand that preparedness is holistic. It's not just about building higher seawalls, although engineering plays a role. It's also about community education, knowing the warning signs, having clear evacuation plans, and fostering individual responsibility. There's that powerful, maybe harsh-sounding maxim from some coastal communities in Japan, tsunami tendenko.
What does that mean?
It essentially means run for your own life. Don't worry about others, not even family, just get yourself to safety immediately. It sounds counterintuitive, maybe even cold, but it comes from hard-earned experience that maximizing individual survival in those first critical moments ultimately saves the most lives overall. It underscores that personal, immediate action is vital. Look, today's magnitude 6.9 quake near Kamchatka, and importantly, the fact that it didn't trigger a tsunami serves as a really potent reminder. It reminds us of the planet's power, yes, but also of how far our scientific understanding and warning capabilities have come. We can now differentiate threats much more clearly. Whether you draw insights from scientific models, look at historical patterns, or even consider how cultural stories shape perception, what ultimately matters is how we interpret all that information. Resilience in the end really comes down to having good knowledge, understanding the context, and being truly ready.
That's a great way to frame it. Knowledge, context, and readiness. So what are your thoughts on today's deep dive? The Kamchatka quake, the science, the connection to those 2025 discussions. We genuinely love to hear your insights. Please leave us a comment wherever you're listening. And if you found this exploration helpful or insightful, please share it with someone else who might appreciate it. Remember to follow us for more evidence-based but always engaging explorations into natural phenomena, human curiosity, and everything in between.